I'm Volker Gerdts. I'm the Director and CEO of VIDO-Intervac at the University of Saskatchewan. I think Canada, as many other countries, really showed a lot of collaboration and enthusiasm in the beginning to collaboratively work towards this problem and solve it. We have lots of really good researchers, not only vaccine researchers, but also virologists and immunologists in the country. And quickly, I think we all came together to work towards solutions, try to address the problem, try to learn more about the virus, try to learn what kind of immune response we need, what animal model we need, and so on. And that was supported by the government, who very quickly announced a rapid response program. CHR came out with their first call for grants just within weeks after the pandemic hit, and with an amazingly short review period. So within days, they had these grants reviewed and funding announced. So overall, a very quick and very collaboratively response, and I think that's typical Canadian. Genomics is really the science of understanding how body function or cell functions occur, and our genetic code, if you want, is a large library, and so really understanding how each of these genes are being turned on and turned off, and what the outcome from that is, how it affects the physiology of the cell and overall the function of the organism. So understanding really how genetically the various functions, the biology of it is encoded, and understanding it is really what genomics is. And so Canada, I would say, has this very strong genomics profile. We have Genome Canada as a very large research organization who over the years, decades now, have systematically funded large genome projects in the country and really have helped to build the expertise that we currently have. So if you want to develop a good vaccine, and good meaning an effective vaccine, you really need to understand what part of the immune system, what part of the immune response to the virus you need to activate. And to do that, you need to understand how the immune system recognizes the virus and how it then launches an attack to control this virus. And so that is all encoded in the genome, and it's really genomics and through genomics that we understand how, for example, antibodies are being utilized, how T cells are being utilized. So it's really understanding how the host response to the virus occurs and what mechanisms are involved. VIDO-Intervac is one of Canada's 10 major science infrastructures. We are one of the largest infrastructures for infectious disease research, and our focus is really on emerging diseases. And so we were, in the context of COVID-19, we were the first lab in Canada to isolate the virus from one of the initial patients. We were then the first in Canada to establish an animal model for COVID-19, which allows us to test vaccines, but also looking at antivirals and other therapeutics. And now we're also one of the few groups in Canada that already have a vaccine candidate in proof of concept studies in animals. And so what we're doing here is really we're living at the interface between human and animal health. And so many of these emerging diseases, that's exactly where they originate from. And as we see with COVID-19, whenever these viruses jump the species barrier and jump from one species into the next one, in this case the human, that's when we see these emerging diseases occur, and sometimes the consequences can be as catastrophic as they are with the current pandemic. And so much of our research is really focused on understanding both animal and human health, the overlap between those, the diseases that are caused by these pathogens coming from animals or vice versa. We call them zoonotic infections. And so that's really where VIDO-Intervac nationally has a niche, and that's where we really have the largest impact on Canada as a country. the normal steps in vaccine development, which normally for human vaccines take in the range of 10 years, sometimes even more, are that you initially have what is called the lab phase, where you actually make the vaccine. And so that is happening in the lab, and there is a lot of optimization involved in small-scale production and purifying and so on. And in this case here at VIDO-Intervac, we jumped through this in 5 weeks, and after 5 weeks we had our vaccine generated, optimized, and then manufactured, if you want, at small scale in the lab, and purified and ready for immunization. And then once you have that, comes a phase where we take these prototype candidates then into proof of concept testing in animals. And so that's the first thing you have to do. You have to show in proper animal models that the vaccines are what we call immunogenic, so that means they're inducing an immune response, and that the immune response is the right type of immune response, as we discussed earlier, so that we actually protect the animals from the infection. So what you need is to have an animal model, which in this case for COVID-19, we're using the ferret and the hamster. And then you also need to understand what type of immune response you need to provide protection. The next steps then are critical, and that's the safety testing of the vaccine. And so we want to make sure that whatever we develop for humans is safe, that there is no unwanted or adverse events to the vaccine or to the immunization with the vaccine. And so that is something that the regulators around the world want to see, and it's very, very important that we have good rigor in those assays and those tests to make sure that the vaccine is fully safe. And so we're projecting that phase will take about 2 to 3 months. And the critical point here is that you have to use vaccine material that is being produced the same way as your final product will be produced. And this is where the crunching comes in, where all of us right now are looking at how can we speed up this process. And so you see some of these vaccine technologies already being in human testing, and that is because they had platform technologies available that had undergone already some of the safety testing, and so they could quickly get through this process. In our case, we have started to manufacture this clinical grade material already in March, and so we're expecting now, where we actually have some of the material available already, and so we can start our safety testing over the next few weeks now. And then after the safety testing comes the phase where the regulator now permits you to test the vaccine in humans. And so there's a series of clinical trials. They call phase 1 to phase 3 clinical trials. And so the phase 1 clinical trial is a small trial, and it usually enrolls 30 to 60 volunteers or something like that. And there you're only looking for any adverse reactions to the vaccine. So the simple question, is the vaccine in humans, is it safe as well as it is in animals? And then comes phase 2, which enrolls hundreds of volunteers, and there you're also now looking at understanding the immune response to the vaccine, and you continue to watch for the safety profile of it. And then if those two are going well, then you can continue with your phase 3 trial, and that typically involves thousands of individuals. And that is really to see then how well the vaccine does out there when people are getting vaccinated. Are they protected from infection or not? Normally, the process like this takes 10 to 12 years. Shrinking into a year and a half is really magic, but that's what all of us are trying to do right now. And it really works if everything falls in place, and if you can do all of these things in parallel. And even, if one prototype doesn't work out, you just throw it out and you wasted a few $100,000. But overall, because you're working in parallel, you're driving the process forward as quickly as possible. And that's what we're seeing around the world, with potentially the first vaccines coming out early next year. We are part of a World Health Organization expert groups, in fact 3 expert groups, and one of them is an expert group on vaccines. And so we have there a relatively open exchange of information, people presenting their data. We presented our data just last week on how well our vaccine did. And so the data is openly shared, which is very, very unusual, and is being discussed by these groups from around the world. And that's really, in my experience, something that is very unprecedented compared to the normal vaccine where everybody's trying to protect their technology. The pandemic has really shown us that the critical issue of self-sufficiency. I think it's very dangerous for a country to depend on others to produce a vaccine for us, hoping that they will adhere to the guidelines and share their vaccines with us. And so I think for Canada, we're recognizing the importance of having vaccines for Canadians available. And so we rather want to be in a situation where we can share with others than depending on others to share with us. Canada historically has done phenomenally well when it comes to vaccine development and also vaccine manufacturing. I mean, we had some of the largest multinational players in Canada, including Sanofi Pasteur, who's still there, GSK, Pfizer, and so on. So all the big companies are here. And in addition to that, we also years ago had quite a bit of infrastructure in place to manufacture those technologies that are coming out of universities, so public research funded technologies and so on. What we've seen, though, over the last decade is a disappearance of those manufacturing facilities, and it's really now concentrated in a few that are currently in private hand and that are being used for other vaccine production and so on, including some of the large ones in Toronto. And so where Canada has really fallen behind over the last few years is having those manufacturing facilities that can take on public research technologies like our own, or also even just to produce the material to start these clinical trials, so the pilot scale production, and get them into the development process going as we discussed. And so this is now where we see that the government is recognizing it and has funded a number of different facilities, including VIDO-Intervac. We're building our own manufacturing facility here, which will serve that purpose in that it's a smaller scale public research facility. But even there, with our own vaccine, we can produce millions of doses per month if needed. I think it's a good question, and it's a very valid concern. When you hear that normally it takes 10 years and now we're saying we can do it in a year and a half, well, what kind of shortcuts are you taking? What is it you're not showing us? And I think this is, again, what I tried to express earlier. The safety testing is really paramount in all of this. And so we are not, and the regulator is not allowing anyone to take any shortcuts there. And so really what we're trying to do right now is to do as many activities in parallel. So normally you would wait for, let's say you have the clinical or the preclinical development, the proof of concept, and then you start your manufacturing. While in a situation like this, you would have started manufacturing already 2 months before, to then maybe find out that you manufactured a product that is not working and that you have to throw it out. And so right now, I think in the face of the pandemic, people are willing to be a little bit more, risky, if you want, in going with multiple prototypes in parallel forward, and then just focus on the one that shows that it's effective. But then you have a proper safety testing of that one. So it's not that we're compromising the tests. We're just a little bit more, willing to spend money and even lose money on things, on technologies, on approaches, on candidates that don't work well, in the interest of time, so that we don't get to a certain point and then start all over. Now it's like a horse race. Rather than, starting with one horse and finding out that horse didn't make it and start with the next horse, right now we're starting with 4 horses in parallel, and only one will make it. But we're allowing to screen while we're going and find out which one works. But then that one horse will be as rigorously tested for safety as you would with any other vaccine candidate. I think there is a number of things that we learn from this. Number one, to me, it just shows the impact infectious diseases can have. And, living in Canada, we're very privileged here. Normally, we don't come in contact with a lot of infectious diseases, which, leads people to believe that we don't need vaccines anymore, or even if you don't get vaccinated, your neighbor does, and so there is enough herd immunity and so on. So number one, it shows us all what the impact of a disease can be economically and how it can affect our lives. Number two, I think, is recognition that these diseases continue to emerge. And with a more global world and people, being today in Canada and tomorrow in Asia, the chance of spreading these diseases around is so much bigger. And so emerging diseases will continue to happen. And this is just one example, but there will be another one after. And so really what we need to, as a country, think about how can we, at all angles, better prepare for this. And so after SARS-1, there was a period where, we talked about pandemic preparedness and how we get ready for it and so on. And then, of course, other priorities came and it kind of got forgotten. And I think this is really my hope, that this lesson will not let us forget, and so that we always worry about how can we better be prepared. I think it makes us immensely proud of being part of the response, and especially for me as the director of this institute, it makes me proud to see, the caliber of scientists we have and how they're stepping up right now, working long days, 6-7 days a week. Everybody's stepping up right now and is just giving their best. I mean, we have students volunteering to work with the health authority here to sterilize masks. We have, essentially everybody's saying if there's anything we can do towards the vaccine, let me know. So you really see how people are stepping up, and it makes me very proud to be part of that community and really hopefully provide a solution to this problem. Most scientists, though, we did not get into this profession because we like to be in the limelight. So it's really something that I think that's why we're here for. This is why VIDO-Intervac is here for. That is our calling, and right now it's our time to show that we can deliver. I'm Volker Gerdts, and this is my future economy.